Welcome to True Health Live, your favorite public health podcast. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, and audio on your favorite podcast platforms. If you're interested in public health, then this is the space for you. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to True Health Live. Hopefully, you can hear. Can you hear me? I don't know why. Yeah. All right. Peace, everyone. How are you? Welcome to the space. Welcome to True Health Live. I know a lot of people are filtering in, but this is also a podcast. So for those of you who are looking at this later or catching this podcast broadcast at a later date, we want to welcome you to the space. So tonight we're actually going to, in observance, I guess, right? Or I don't want to say honor of, but in observance, it is May is Mental Health Month or Mental Health Awareness Month, and we kicked it off with our discussion on spirituality, and talking about Emilia Kara Eden's book on spirituality, and how to move through that, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But it's really important. It was really important that we kind of like fell in line with what's happening in the public health zeitgeist, if you will. So tonight's is about workplace toxicity. We've all experienced it, whether we have been the victims of or perpetrators. Let's keep it real. And so we invite everybody to share their stories, whether it's your story or something that you know of, right? You can share anonymously, so we'll definitely put the link in the chat so you can join us on stage. You don't necessarily have to turn on your camera, it's fine, but we want to make sure we hear you clearly, so just make sure your microphone is on. So before we get into it, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. As many of you know, myself and Emilia Kara Eden, Precious Stepney, we are part of a community, Anu Life Global Ministries, and we do have a retreat coming up this summer, and so we are inviting everyone to visit anulifeglobal.org and sign up for the retreat. It is open to families. Anu is about family, or if you don't have a family, we will be your family. This is the space that you want to be. Our retreats are so much fun. If you like kickball, yeah. Right? If you like kickball, we have some competitive folks in the space who like kickball.
Not me though.
I don't even know if I know how to play that well anymore. Volleyball, obstacle courses, fishing. We have so many things. Sometimes we don't even get around to doing it. We are going to be doing some beading and a whole lot of stuff at the retreat. And speaking of beading, I think I announced we did do a beading workshop from Deidre Sully Public Health Consulting. So we partnered with the YMCA. It was amazing. So for those of you who are interested in crafts and helping that to reduce your stress, you can visit us on the website. And we'll put the website up later. But definitely come to the retreat. It's a good time. Again, you can visit anulifeglobal.org, and then you can click on the picture. It'll be the first one as soon as you sign onto the site, and then go and look at the frequently asked questions and find out. And one thing that, I think it's important to say, the retreat is all inclusive. With the exception of your travel, it is an all-inclusive retreat. So definitely make sure you check it out. The other thing that I want to make sure that we get in front of you is our Red Wrap Drive. So as many of you know, I'm very, very excited, and I've always been really like, this is my baby. Working with the Anu Life Global Ministries and having the opportunity to do the Red Wrap program or ministry, excuse me. And we currently have our menstrual hygiene drive coming. So for those of you who are really passionate about reproductive health, sexual and reproductive health, menstrual health, we encourage you and implore you to donate. You can go to anulifeglobal.org/redwrap, and you can visit our site to either donate via GoFundMe. If you click on the link, it'll take you right to our Amazon wish list, and you can donate that way. or you can send your donations directly to the Diaper Bank of North Carolina, because our upcoming events will be in North Carolina. So we'll be meeting with several sisters on Wednesday, May 24th, to do the packing event where we'll get everything together. And then on May 26th, we'll be working with the Raleigh Rescue Mission to hold an event. So make sure you visit so you can sign up to either volunteer to come and help us pack, or you can donate. The other part that I want to talk to you about are the books. So here in our new, like, it is all about making sure that we are entrepreneurs, right? So as I stated, there are books. So I'm gonna let like Yakira talk about her book. It is was appropriately and timely released during Mental Health Awareness Month. So it is the scriptural guide to overcoming 7 mental ailments. So
Yes, peace. I am Ima Yakira Eden, as previously mentioned, and I'm really, really grateful for the instruction and guidance and support that led to this book being published. It's available on Amazon, so if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can download it there, or you can order a paperback copy. In the scriptural guide to overcoming 7 mental ailments, I actually delve into things or themes such as worry, fear, angst, loss, and even mental fog. We go through a series of scriptural examples of how these ailments or challenges have manifested or shown themselves, and also using scripture to show how you move past it and how you overcome, right? And then, I am really active and love to do yoga. And so, of course, there's the Alpha Woman Now YouTube channel where I have yoga. So there's also yoga or movements or asanas in the book, along with activities that we do within our community. Some of the activities are directly as instructed by Chief Yuya, with links to how you can follow those steps and move past fear, even writing your fears a breakup letter, a Dear John letter, and the corresponding command the day where Chief actually talks about fear. So grab yourself a copy, share it, and if you do get a copy, please give your feedback. Share in the review section on Amazon. Yeah.
give thanks, give thanks. And also, as you know, like, there is my ebook that is available for everyone, the 10 points in public health. So we all about public health up in these spots, in these streets. So make sure you go to deidreselly.com and download your free copy, and it will open you up to so many more public health goodies on the website. So speaking of, ailments and things like that, there are many things that cause ailments, right? And um, some of them physical, some of them mental. And so today, or this evening, we're going to be talking about those things that kind of affect us, in not even kind of, that affect us in the workplace. And again, whether we have been the perpetrators of, and let's be honest, or the victims of. So that being said, Eden, why don't you hit us with, what does it mean? What's a toxic workplace? And while she's doing that, everybody start putting some of your toxic workplace examples into the chat.
Sure. So a toxic work environment is one where employees feel disrespected. We're going to talk about that. Bullied, overworked, and stressed. When we think of the term toxic, right? You often think of like chemicals, right? Toxic chemicals or toxic relationships, or toxic environment in general. The toxic piece is always acknowledging something that is harmful, or that is, disturbing your balance, right? It's creating stasis. So it's putting you in an off balance mental state or even physical state. If you have a toxic chemical come in contact with your skin, you oftentimes know, right? Because you'll feel a burn, you'll feel itchy, right? So
Ernie,
that, yeah, yeah, itching or burning, yeah.
burning. No, I was gonna make a different kind of word combination. It's come out a whole nother word.
Okay, don't do it. Don't do it. Um, but that is what we're going to get into, right? What that toxic workplace looks like, and even just the idea of how oftentimes, even, and I know we're going to get into it, but how those microaggressions co- contribute to disrespect. And I was just focusing on the disrespect because that was like one of the first, examples given in that definition. But even bullying and what that can look like. And it's not always from, superior to the subordinate or supervisor to the, subordinate.
Right.
As we get information coming in, I'll actually share uh it was disrespect, it was bullying, it was completely toxic. And I'm sure many of you can relate as you climb that corporate ladder or whatever ladder. If you are, let's see, because now my mindset is so much on a lean to entrepreneurship, right? Let me see if it would apply even in the realm of entrepreneurship, because there's still, relationship building and coalition building that is required. um but I remember entering the field of quality, healthcare quality. And it was my first job with the state. And my interest was never really in making friends at work, but it's a nice thing to have, people that you can connect with.
It's a bonus.
And yeah, like it's a good thing to have. And so I made a few, and I would say that my colleagues were always much older than I was, just because of like the track that I was on professionally. And so this older woman, female, we became really, really good friends, like at her house, all sorts of things. And then our supervisor was promoted and he transferred to another hospital. It happened to be the hospital right next door on the same campus, just a different building. And he let me know that I would be functioning as the supervisor for some of his previous departments, one of which was her department.
Mm-hmm.
I I thought I was a good friend. I gave her a heads up, like, hey, this is coming. Like, it doesn't need to change anything. I'll have my role, but we can still be friends. This is what I'm thinking. She started acting like a fool. When I say a fool, she was nasty. She intentionally would not submit reports on time. And I was kind of in this conundrum, like, do I tell now my boss, right? Do I say something? Do I do the work myself? And ultimately I was like, no, this is bullying and it was disrespect. Like everything we enumerated down there, I felt it. So what we wound up doing was having like a meeting, a mediation type meeting, because our former supervisor knew that like y'all were good friends. This doesn't make any sense. This woman sits in the meeting and says, "Well, I really don't think she's qualified. I don't think she's qualified to be my supervisor, nor do I think it's appropriate because she doesn't know my specific domain." And yada went She went
Maybe.
off.
Right. Did she apply for that job?
She did not. She just did not want me to be her supervisor. And so she pulled on every bully tactic possible. And for me, what it empowered, it taught me some lessons. One, about how I navigate that friendship role in the workplace, because
Mm.
I definitely moved very differently. I still maintained a cordial work environment. I may have gone to the outside events at that time, but actually, I wasn't going to your house, and you're not my friend. But but I also, in that particular scenario, I had to take something that could have been a very toxic workplace environment and find a way to create balance, to create a new balance. And it really took cultivating the soil, like really just pushing I would say, it took emotional maturity. I had to be mature enough to say, okay, these pieces are just me the human me wanting to react to my hurt feelings, poor me, versus the charge. What is the mission? What am I given the opportunity to do? And how do I move past what's
Mm.
happening? And so, I think it's really beautiful that whenever we can take those tenets of Anu thought, right? I know you touched on some of the upcoming activities, but also on the website there is the Anue Foundations, which lays out exactly who and what we are, and a piece of that are the required qualities, and being emotionally mature, being able to parse your reactive desire from which truth in the moment is a part of how we can actually surmount the toxic workplace environment.
Yeah, well, I'll say I knew that was not my. That's not.
Were you a
But
petty penny? Come on.
no, but you know what? No, like you said, like I don't think I would have called it being emotionally mature then, but in order to move through some of those situations, I did have to take on some emotional maturity, and
Right.
also, and meaning whether it meant like alter my own behavior and
Mhm.
recognize how I was contributing to the situation, but also be receptive to what somebody's telling you, right? Because just because you don't like what you're being told or what somebody's saying to you doesn't mean that it's incorrect, or doesn't mean that it can't help you. And so I had to really, and it's like, well, if you want to move forward, if you want to climb the ladder, there are things that you're going to have to listen to people who were further along and have been where you are now, and if you want to go where they are and even surpass them. So, and also like understand they have a charge. Okay, so how can we do things so that you can meet whatever it is you need to meet, and I can do whatever it is I can do.
Right.
So yeah, I wouldn't have called it emotional maturity, then, but it was like I have to do something. I have to get past it because it's also not a good feeling. You wake up and it's like, I don't want to go to this place. I hate this place. You do everything to not be there,
Right.
right? And so, like, you actually end up suffering by engaging in the toxicity. Everybody ends up suffering. And you brought up something that I want to talk about is like the dynamic, right, between friends, work friends, when one becomes the subordinate or the superior, and so that always can be like a tricky thing. And we did get a story in today that kind of and it's anonymous, that kind of goes through that. But first, I do want to acknowledge the chat. Peace, everyone.
Busy in there. It's busy in that chat.
You for joining us. Peace, Margie Marie Art. Welcome to
Peace,
the space.
peace.
Peace, Master Menulek. Peace, Akuya Bisa. Margie Marie Art says, beautiful book. I received mine in the mail on Yom Rishon. Yom Rishon is first day, also known as Sunday, and have recommended it to my coworkers. I'm looking forward to diving into
Thank
it.
you. Yay.
Master Menulek says, sometimes I spike the workplace coffee with hot sauce. Does that count? Yes. That is passive aggressive. If this is true,
That's
that
bullying.
is, and it is. I wouldn't even say microaggression. It is bullying, but passive aggressive can
That's
be bullying. But
aggression. Right,
it's,
right.
I mean, but I was like, well, if they don't know he's doing it, it's like
Sneak aggression.
sneakish aggressive, sneakish aggressive.
Sneakish aggressive. We have coined a new term here on True Health Live.
Peace, Naya. Peace. Welcome to the space.
Yes.
Peace, Lo the Scholar, also known as Aki El Karai. Thank you for joining.
Yes. Yes.
He says, who bullies a woman named Precious? All the Preciouses I knew were bullies. Oh, well, now we have divine names. So we have moved past those points. Peace, Arlene Adams. How are you? Thank you for joining us. So I'm going to reset the room real quick and just let everybody know that we are talking about toxic workplace environments, and so everyone is invited to share. And so the link is in the chat. It is in there now. The link is in the chat for those of you who would like to join us and share your workplace toxicity story, or even if it was something that you witnessed in the workplace, because not all the times are we, firsthand people, directly impacted. But being that it is in the workplace, you can be indirectly impacted because toxic workplaces create high levels of stress due to constant conflict. It could be unfair treatment, lack of support or recognition, characterized by like, harassment, negative behaviors. It could be hostile, even violent. Bullying, as Ima Yakira, excuse me, said before, discrimination, pressure from the job, things like that. And they can really lead to psychological health problems like anxiety, depression, insomnia, even
Mhm.
burnout. So, and I know, like, for those of you who are listening on LinkedIn, definitely come and share some of that information. I was gonna read it, but also I'll share. I don't know if I don't have a story, but I will say that, like, I've been a perpetrator. So, and I'm
Oh, okay. That's a
I,
story. That's a
I
story.
mean, and because it's like the response thing, like how you were talking, I don't like who I have to report to now. So I'm just gonna like kind of stay in my own world and like I don't and I guess it was kind of like the woman that you had we're dealing with. And I'll say it like this. You know what? It is a story because it actually has a happy ending. So I was passed over for a position. That's why I asked, like, did she apply for the job? So I was passed over for a position, and so the person that came in, while he was cool and everything, I was just like, I'm not trying to do too much helping because there were other things where it was like, this is like the same old story. It's like I gotta train you to do the job
Right.
I'm already prepared to do. So there's already those that feeling of angst, even anger, and so it's just like kind of standoffishness, which is a microaggression, right? So it was, and I want to say that because like a lot of times we hear microaggressions, I always hear it in the context when it comes to the DEI, when we're talking about that. And it's not always has to do with the diversity, equity, and inclusion area. Sometimes it can just be microaggressions because you don't like the way that something has played out.
Right.
So I didn't like it. So I was very standoffish. And so you know what he did? He took me to lunch. And so we got, and I like food. But so we got, and I had like a
He
kale
knew your
salad.
love language. He's like, I'm gonna bribe this chick.
Right. And interesting enough, he was vegan. It
Look at
was hilarious.
that. Look at that.
Hilarious. And so we had, lunch, and he was telling me about some of his experiences and like and something that came up. He was like, why kale is, being sold, and he was like, it's because the kale farmers. And I was like, really? And so in this, like as we're having conversation over food, I'm learning some things. I'm like, all right, maybe he's not that bad. And then another way that we kind of became closer, which was interesting, and maybe this was like toxic too. It was actually sending an email jointly because someone had sent something to us based on a project that we did, and we had really worked hard on, to get to, a certain place, and someone else did not like that they were not included. So then we became
Allies.
allies. And it was like,
Right.
as per my last email. It was horrible. It was horrible. So like through that, like through being like somewhat toxic, to someone else, it was like, all right, let's not do this to each other because we're on the same team. And
Right.
if the goal is to win and to do well and to show that we can do this, then we have to be on the same team. We have to be on the same page. And also because if you're not, it actually can, have a negative impact on the culture of your organization or the culture of your program if, from the top isn't together. Because what do they say? If what I'm I'm bad with saying, like if the fish is poison, if it's sick, cut off the head, something like that. Or if it if it comes, whatever's happened is coming from the head. It's coming from the top down. So like if you can't get it together,
I think it's the fish rots from the head down. I think. I think because if you like if I think, and I think that I'm gonna give my supportive statement because, like, if you're when I would shop for like fresh fish, my grandmother said you always look at the eyes. If the
ah,
eyes are milky, then you know the fish is no good. So but like it rots from the head, and then it kind of
that. See that? And yeah, I mean, but it always like filters top down when it's a hierarchy. If you can't get it together at the top, if you're not organized, then it's going to seep and kind of
Right.
filter down into everything below that, and then that's no good for anyone. So we really became like allies, and instead of being like toxic to this other person, it was more like let's protect our team.
Mm-hmm.
So not continue to engage like we'll send this email right now, and then and then it's like all right, put up the fence.
Right.
so so that's like a way, and so that kind of like ebbed and flowed through different kind of ways where it was like me, then it was us, and then it was somebody else. But it's like the way to move through it was like, all right, we are on the same team. So and it may not always work out that way. It really may not. And because it depends on the type of toxicity that you're experiencing. Now, if it's something like harassment, like sexual harassment or discrimination or hostility, just hostile workplaces, it's not going to necessarily work out like that. And there are different kind of avenues that one should take. Like sometimes, and especially if it's getting to the point where it is having an effect on you physically, there are oh my gosh, resources. Sometimes
Yes.
your job gives to like your EAP. Oh, welcome, 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 welcome.
Peace. Welcome.
Peace, peace, peace.
Peace.
There are resources that you can get from your so like employee assistance. Oh my gosh, help me
Well,
if you
yeah,
please.
there's the employee assistance program. There's
Pro-
also affirmative action, which
Right.
I dubbed in one of my roles. I had like so many hats, but one of those roles was affirmative action officer. Of course, now there is, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is the DEI officer.
Yeah.
But there are always resources. And I think that, we're always about empowering and offering tools, right? And so one tool that I think is really important when you're navigating a toxic workplace is to be sure you maintain a journal. Make sure you keep copious notes and records, and recognize that this is kind of tricky. Oftentimes, a person will say something is discriminatory, but you should know what the EEO, what the Equal Employment Opportunity laws state, and recognize what is actually what is actually a discriminatory act versus just a grossly inappropriate workplace violence and perhaps against your agency's policy. Those are important tools to have because that can help determine whether you have something that can be resolved over a lunch, or if you're a supervisor, you're experiencing something that should be resolved over a lunch versus something where you may want to pull in your HR representative or your affirmative action officer as an ally to kind of say, hey, I think this is going in this direction.
Mm.
And the same would apply if you are the subordinate experiencing something, whether it's peer to peer. You always want to maintain a journal that is kept outside of the office.
Yes.
Okay.
Be in writing, especially if it's gotten to that point. You should always, and I've been through those situations as well, where every interaction. So, and if something was on the phone or held verbally, you need to go and sit down, and so because everything is your recall is freshest right after a situation, and you need to write that down so that you can document everything.
Yeah. I know there was some activity in the chat.
Yeah. I'm like, and I guess Akuya will join us, Akuya Sutherland. So come on.
Yes.
So while we're waiting for her to come back, we'll go to the chat. Shalom, Sovereign Eats, welcome. Nice to meet you. Right, Naya, Master Man, you like doing sneak attacks. That's exactly what sneak attacks with hot sauce. Willfully is not like hot sauce made from habanero peppers, because that's just mean. Arlene Adams says it's sad when people associate their job title to their identity. That's where they find their value within themselves. Yeah, because it's like, how many times has someone said, "Who are you?" or you heard the question asked, "Who are you?" and then the answer was what they do for a living. And I've done that. Sometimes I say, I don't know. You have to be honest about like what that is. Who you are is not the same as what you are.
Right.
That's to me, and it says, they also say if it walks like a duck and looks like a rhinoceros, call Ghostbusters. Who you gonna call? I guess so. Yeah, sure. Our leader says this is toxic because their success or failure is based on their job instead of the job just being a source, right? Like a means to an end, which is why entrepreneurship is better, right? Because then, like, it doesn't mean that you will be immune from the toxicity because if you're an entrepreneur, either you are providing services via contract to someone else, or which means that or you're working for self, right? But it still means that there is some engagement. Oh, we loved your plants. Why'd you move? But there still means that there's some engagement with other people. So there's still, it means you still have to navigate the you have to navigate the characteristics, the personalities of others who are outside of yourself. So that's where you have to start, like, being emotionally mature, put yourself in someone else's shoes before you like immediately respond. Think 7 times, because a lot of the times we have to realize, you have to take a step back and think, am I contributing to the toxicity? If so, how do I stop? And then how to, in order to eliminate or remove myself from the situation. And the truth is, sometimes it means just leaving. No, nothing is worth, you becoming physically ill because of someone else's action. That's just not cool. So I'm gonna pause the story that was sent to us, and I'll wait since we have a live person, to share their stories. So welcome, Aquia Lisa. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you. Peace, ladies. How are you guys doing?
Very
Good.
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 Yeah, I had to move from outside because someone's dog was barking and I didn't want to disturb the program. So I decided to move really quickly. But I wanted to kind of touch on just, go back because you guys were just discussing, about workplace toxicity. And that is a subject that we cover or I cover in some classes that I teach. Um, I facilitate a class called Assault Response Competency Course, and within it, it talks about different types of workplace violence, and there are 4 different types. And it sounds like because the toxic environment is not just only with your coworker, but but it is, and the ones with the coworker are they're called lateral, I believe lateral. Yeah, workplace type 3, as a matter of fact, and it's coworker to coworker, and that could be, and I'm speaking particularly in healthcare. And again, Ema Yakira, excuse me, yeah, Yakira Eden. I'm sorry.
You got it.
It may not just be with superiors, it can be doctors and nurses, or supervisees to staff, but then also peer to peer as well. And then also you can experience patient to coworker, patient to staff as well, which is workplace violence type 2. And then moving along, Yafe, when you spoke about, that resolve. And one thing is that we also talk about is to report it. I think you mentioned it too, Yakira, to report it. And, OSHA has standards for workplace violence. And so we often have to, or I find myself having to encourage a lot of the nurses or other healthcare staff to, whatever the documentation that you need to do, go ahead and, do that documentation. But there are many who decline to do it because it happens all the time.
Right.
But also they're not informed either. If the course for you to take, this training course is required for you to take through hospital facilities, that means that there is, an organization that's monitoring that. And I like to help healthcare workers feel empowered. Like, listen, you can report it and you can even follow up with what the investigation is going to be, and if you're not happy with it, go to the organization, and there are other outlets that you can utilize as well.
I love what you're sharing and the perspective that you're coming from as you're talking about the hesitance to report. It makes me think of uh, a subheading that I used to use to help empower staff when I functioned as affirmative action. But honestly, I used it just in my general leadership style. So once what employees may not understand sometimes, especially the aggressor, is that once the complainant files the complaint, the moment you do anything that may be perceived as retaliation, you can now be charged as creating a hostile work environment
Yes.
by way of retaliation, because the paper trail has begun. So if I change, just sticking with the field of healthcare, if I change your shift, all of a sudden, if I change your assignment, all of a sudden, if I make any sort of, I reject or revoke some of your requests for time that may have already been approved, or I reject a request for time that were pending approval, but I don't give appropriate rationale, you can then say, hey, I initiated this complaint, and now I believe that I am being retaliated against. It actually gives more credibility and more credence to the initial complaint, as well as it requires your employer, right? And now I mean the overarching entity, to hold that supervisor or peer accountable, because now we're talking like an actual lawsuit. So again, I think that we have to offer tools. And so be empowered, report, keep
Yes.
notes.
Yes. And sadly, a lot of people think that there's nothing that's going to be done. And sometimes it is not, especially if you're dealing with the doctor. Oh, that's just how the doctor is. And, and no one wants to,
Ruffle
stand up and say,
feathers.
no,
Yeah.
this is not okay, and I won't tolerate it. And I want to go through, those steps to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And I also encourage healthcare workers to use the word, this is workplace hostility. Please, I will not accept the way that you were speaking with me. I will not accept this bullying. This is bullying. Like, when you start naming and using these terms, and other people understand that you recognize what these things are, something different happens.
Absolutely.
Something different happens. But moving along, Yafe, I do agree. At some point, are you going to stay in this environment? You don't have to stay in this environment. And what I'm also finding amongst nurses is there is a major shall I say, migration, or the great resignation. Many nurses are leaving the bedside because they don't want to tolerate it, or they're standing up and saying, we, under these terms, we are going to work under these terms. So
Yeah. The other version of that is the quiet quitting, where people just kind of like sink into the back for whatever means necessary. Like, I'm gonna take FMLA and just like not be here for a while, or
yes,
I'm gonna take my PTO, like, or I'm gonna take a leave of absence.
yes, take a leave of absence and don't
Take
and
a second
don't
job and
return.
kind of like let this one filter, peter on out. Let the program
Yes,
kind of go.
yes. But it had to be brought to my own attention to leave the bedside. I'm so glad I did. Sometimes I try to picture myself going back, and I think about those hours. I'm like, oh no, I can't, I can't do it. But I have stories. I actually have more. I've seen, there are stories where either you experience, toxic environments or bullying, or where you observe it. I even find that a lot of people who observe it, they won't even do anything, or say anything
Yeah.
about it as well. As I think about my own story, I do have one that I've observed, if you don't mind you don't mind me sharing, because I have to dig deep, um, because it's been a while since. I think those type of things happened to me when I was a new nurse, but
Mm.
as I gained more knowledge, it happened less and less. But I remember when I was at LVN, um, many times, well, some years ago, and I actually a coworker. There was a coworker, and she and I were very good friends, and LVNs are under the supervision of RNs. So the charge nurse had informed my coworker that she was going to be getting an admission, and my coworker wasn't happy about it at all. And she kind of stomped around, her body language just, displayed her disdain about receiving another patient. And finally, when it was close to the time for her receiving the patient, she in the hallway confronted the charge nurse and was loud and very intimidating. Was posturing, and she's like what 5'9", and the charge nurse is a you know little itty bitty, and but she was posturing, and I watched all of this, and when she finished what she was saying, because I didn't want to interrupt in the hallway, I took her to the side, and I said, you were wrong. Like, you should not have done that. I don't see what the problem is in receiving an admission. And there are plenty of people that could have helped her with it, but the charge nurse was so upset. She went to the back room and actually cried, and I felt so bad. And I was disgusted with what she did, and she thought that the coworker thought I was, well, you're taking her side. No, this isn't about sides. You should not have approached her. If you did not like that, you could have taken her to the side and maybe spoke to her, let her know what your assignment was like, if it was a high acuity or if it was a heavy load. But she just went ballistic on her in the hallway in front of other staff, to someone who is the superior. So yeah, that was very disheartening to see that. So
Yeah. And I know you touched on, in front of other staff, but I don't know, maybe it's the healthcare leader in me, but I'm thinking also in the presence of patients, because even if they're not
yes,
witnessing it, they're hearing it.
yes.
And just thinking about how that impacts one's ability to heal, right? To do better or to feel better when you're experiencing that kind of environment.
Mhm.
But kudos to you for being that advocate in that moment, and and
Yeah,
calling out what
yeah.
wasn't right.
I don't have a problem doing that. I did not have a problem doing that. And honestly, um, I will say, I'm going to be honest about myself, because in the class I asked, well, be honest and transparent about if you've ever been the culprit.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that I've been on the other side of that. So like knows like, right?
Right.
And I checked her. I was like, no, you were wrong. Like, that is wrong. That was what you did was absolutely wrong. And sometimes um you come in with your guns loaded, and you just because you put this protective barrier, because no one wants to be bullied, stepped on, taken advantage of.
Right.
And so you come in with your guns loaded, which you shouldn't. And she just felt that that was the way that she needed to express herself, and that was wrong.
Yeah, and it goes to show, like, this is why we have to be cognizant of, like, the different personalities and where people are coming from, and some of that is like the DEI, like, so we can kind of understand how different people respond to different things.
Hmm.
Even though her response was that, maybe who she did that to, the smaller nurse who she did that to, she needed a personality like yours who understood what they were looking at to check it,
Hmm.
right? And it would be great if like you had that kind of ability in all HR departments, because you may not have that with your lateral colleagues and whatnot.
Right.
Like, it was amazing that you're able to do that and see it for what it is and respond appropriately. And then and again, and it goes to that the reality of like sometimes we're the culprit, and then calling out like, no, this is what you did wrong. It's not about taking sides. And then kind of seeing also like the maturity level of different people. Like, we might all be adults, but not everybody's at the same maturity level,
Right.
growth, as we all move through this path. And so sometimes we need a little help to be reminded, like, no, that's what you do when you're in high school. Maybe you can respond like that. And even then, it's never okay to intimidate someone just because you didn't like something. If your life wasn't threatened, your child wasn't threatened, there's better ways to respond to something.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
I'm gonna mention in the chat real quick. Master Manuel says, I've seen a lot of tense relationships change for the better when it changes from me versus you to me and you versus the problem. Right. Like, figure out what the real enemy is or what the real target is, because it's not always has to be an enemy. It could just be what your target is and what, as you say, like what the charge is. He says, Dear Diary, Karen from accounting was being real snooty today. Sometimes it be like that. Sometimes it be
Yes, and that happens where you have someone who's nitpicking. You want to nitpick until it's time to really deal with what the real matter at hand. You just want to nitpick off of some little admin stuff, but when
yeah.
we're dealing with a patient, then it's okay. So yeah, there are some Karens around. In fact, actually, yeah, I as an LVN, I was under the supervision of a charge nurse, and she was definitely a Karen, so much so that I would like perspire before going into work. I was high anxiety. I hated to go into work. And I felt it, in my body, because she would nitpick about everything. There was nothing that I could do right. And during those times, I didn't know about you're told about an employee handbook and what's acceptable and what's not. But again, I didn't read it, and I didn't know that
No.
what I was feeling was harassment. They just give you the book, sign the book,
Right.
you know.
Nobody reads it until something happens. And even then, they don't read it. They just go straight to a person who can
Right.
tell them what it says.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's why what you do is so important, being that nurse educator and being that voice to say, hey, I didn't do this. So now you should be empowered. A lot of what we're going through, I just want to highlight are some of the examples of what it looks like based on some of the readings and stuff that we did to prepare for this, some of the examples of a toxic workplace. So I'm going to touch on some of the ones that we may have mentioned and some that
Can I
we
pull up some things too that I have and share in a little bit?
of
When
yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. So we haven't got into pervasive office gossip, but that can really okay. So look, I'm gonna leave that one up to Ema because I know I'll leave that one up to Akuya Visa. We have touched on this, a high level of workplace stress and how, whether it is the nitpicky boss or maybe it's the fast-paced environment, the unrealistic deadlines or expectations on your deliverables or productivity. These are all major examples and signs that you need to foster a balance for yourself, right? You may not be in a position immediately to seek out a new position, but at least recognize the signs and create some coping mechanisms for yourself. The last time we came together, we spoke about, some of the things in our environment that really can serve and support us. Know what your supports are and use them, access them. Use those PTO days, schedule time off when you need to. And sometimes you may need to just call out sick because you are mentally tired. Yeah, I said it. Yeah, I said it. It's called a mental health day. Go on, take one. Um, and that goes right into no care for mental health and physical health. Aquia touched on the idea of patient on staff violence. I'll say, and I've shared before, if you've listened to, especially I think season 1 of the podcast, I spoke a lot about my background being in the behavioral health setting, which is more specifically state psychiatric hospitals. And the sad reality is that one of the biggest issues we had with violence was patient on staff assault, particularly because the patient was just highly acute or actively psychotic and needed time to, have the right treatment regimen titrated. But it doesn't negate the trauma that, that is experienced not only by physically being attacked, but also witnessing it is really, really unsettling. So I'll pause there because say it again.
Like, is it going to happen to me next? And
Yes.
to like the person who's witnessing the workplace toxicity, even if it's like in the office environment. Right. And I'm speaking to like 2 specific comments in the chat. Master Manuel said, like, it's the bystander effect where people witness bullying and look the other way. So there's that. And then he says, like, the quiet quitting can happen because people feel as though filing a complaint will only make things worse, right? Because it becomes, sometimes that means, the workplace toxicity has now, kind of embedded itself in overall organizational culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
It undermines the teamwork, hampers collaboration and innovation. So at this point, it's like, well, if I say something, I'm just going to be the next target on the block. My head's going to
be. Well, it's also called victim blaming for those who want to report it. So a lot of people choose, where there are some who just choose to, I'll let it go. Not that big of a, not that big of a deal. The quiet quitting. Yeah. In relation to, can I just go back to the, oh my, you guys are just in my lane today. Because
welcome.
Because I teach this class in behavioral health facilities, and there are a lot of components to that. And there is a story about there was a nurse who said that she came in late to work, and she told the other nurse, "Don't worry about it, me report." And she went down the hallway to do her rounds, and she was cold caught by a patient. She was caught in a corner somewhere, no mirrors, didn't let anyone know, and she was beat up. And she feels responsible for that. She blames herself for being attacked. And, and while maybe you did not take the precautions, and there's an account in that, but how could you know, that anything like that could happen? But she's very, obviously, I don't know the word that I want to use. I forgot the word that I want to use, but she's very aware of her. She's more aware of her surroundings, but a lot of other nurses who witness it or experience as well, there's an angst that they have, in that specialty. And I just wanted to share, again, this is workplace violence type 2, called customer client. And type 2 violence is the most common in healthcare settings. Again, we're talking about healthcare settings, and this can happen anywhere. And this course considers a customer client relationship to include patients, their family members, and visitors. And research shows that this type of violence occurs most frequently in emergency and psychiatric treatment settings, waiting rooms, and geriatric settings, but is by no means limited to these. So, and then, if you don't mind me reading, worker on worker, type 3 violence between coworkers is commonly referred to as lateral or horizontal violence. It includes bullying and frequent manifests as verbal and emotional abuse that is unfair, offensive, vindictive, or humiliating, though it can range all the way to homicide. Worker on worker violence is often directed at persons viewed as being lower on the food chain, such as in a supervisor to supervisee or doctor to nurse, though incidents of peer-to-peer violence is also common. So all in under the umbrella of workplace toxicity.
Yeah. And it all impacts, stress levels, mental health, overall well-being. Um, I'm gonna point out a comment we have in the chat. Naya says, depending on the situation and people involved, if you do speak up for yourself against toxicity, the reaction may be interpreted as one feeling threatened, changing the dynamic of the situation. Maybe you can elaborate that on a little more. That sounds like you talking about something specific.
Well,
So,
I think that I can see her point, but I also think that then is when you evaluate how you are responding. Are you being
right,
reactionary, or are you responding in appropriate manner? Are you meeting energy with energy? Because if
right,
you are that same energy,
yes,
then maybe it can be perceived as feeling threatened, and and someone can easily flip it on you. You have to be careful, especially if
mm,
you are maybe considered lay or not in any lay member or lay staff, and not in
senior staff,
any,
executive
yeah,
team,
right.
right,
So you do have to be mindful, and that goes to saying, you even within when it comes to resolve a conflict, you do have to evaluate and assess yourself. What are your values? What are your worldviews? How are you presenting? What is your verbiage? What is your tone? Evaluate yourself, as well, and not to take away. Although we have discussions about, I feel this way. You can't tell
right.
me how I feel. Yes, I can tell you how you feel, but you do have to be really mindful of how you respond.
Yeah, that I think that's going back to the emotional maturity part of
Mhm.
the we were having, like acknowledge like what's going on with you before you respond. Um,
Right.
and get it. Sometimes it's like how to say, I got that smoke.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
don't want
honey.
it. You don't want it.
Guns,
You don't
listen,
want that.
jaws tight, guns loaded. Yes,
And it becomes something
yes.
else.
I can relate. Don't get it
Right.
twisted. I am with
Right.
you. Like, this is unacceptable, and you're using everything within you. You
Right.
know,
Because
calm it,
sometimes
calm it.
you do need to match the energy to back the person down. And so that we can now get on and let me match that energy so we on the same level. And then
Right.
we slowly come down.
And what's key
Mhm.
with that idea of matching energy is to be able to recognize the spirit, right? So
Right,
Mhm.
it's if we're going to do it
right,
and we're doing it from a place of objectivity, it's recognizing, and Ema Queer touched on it. It's like, well, I see it because I've done it, right?
Mhm.
So when you recognize that spirit, then you know how to directly address it. You know how to check it. Like she knew to wait, to go in a corner and to say, yo, that was trash. Like what you did
Mhm.
was not right. That was bad. You bad. But also, as I'm listening, it like self-care, having self-care practices. And I know this is something that Ema Queer has shared within in the community of Anu, working with essential oils and how that helps to just balance energy at times. Time management is also really important because there are certain components of our day that we can control. It was a really unfortunate experience and story that you shared. But oftentimes, and I'll acknowledge, I was definitely a chronic late arriver to work.
Oh, you so bad.
I mean, I get there when I get there, but but that also that can create unnecessary angst, right? That can create unnecessary um worry and fear about, okay, if my supervisor says, oh, I need to meet with you, is like, oh my god, are they about to talk to me about my chronic lateness?
right.
These are things that you can control. But I think the last tip that I want to leave you with, just for what we're talking about right now, is you have to know your why. Know why you are showing up to work every day. I'll share a really quick story. Peace, Imanaya.
Yes.
I remember that same supervisor who left, and then a new supervisor came in. You may want to mute out,
Yeah.
Imanaya. There's a little feedback. Thank you. That a new supervisor came in, and I thought the woman was a fool. He was a straight fool, y'all. And he knew his job, but he didn't want to do it. And so I did it because I wanted this. It was quality management. I needed my hospitals to always be winning when it came to survey and compliance. I reached out to that former supervisor. Yeah, we're going to win always. There was no failure. But anywho, I reached out to him because at that point he was more of a mentor, and I'll tell you what he said, and he didn't say know your why. He told me to go home and to print a photo of my family and to keep that photo at my desk. And in so many words, he was saying, know why you're there, no matter what's going on, know what you're there to do and why. And I think that for anyone experiencing any sort of toxic workplace environment, and you may not see a way out at the moment, what you can hold on to are those self-care techniques and literally naming your why and keeping it with you so that you can remind yourself. So I just, I like giving tips and all. I will that we write these things down. But
as usual, when it goes, we'll put everything in the description box. And we encourage people to like, share, and subscribe. All right. So I do have the story that talks about like the same thing, like the subordinate superior transition and how that became toxic for this person who sent us in. And by the way, as always, if there's anything that you want to discuss, you can always email us at truehealthlive@gmail.com. That's where we take all of our stories. Like, so if you're uncomfortable with coming on live, you can always email us and we'll read it live. We'll read it on air and we're going to chop it up and discuss it. So, but people who are on stage, they get first dibs. So go ahead, Imanaya, you can share.
Well, I put one in the chat. I was just thinking back to different things I've observed and experienced. So my experience with the matching energy part, short version, a non-melanated person was going around looking for something and basically touched my stuff and didn't put it back the way that it was. So I asked him, I was like, hey, can you put that back like the way it was before you did what you needed to do? They kept walking. So I said it again, like, hey, just a little bit louder, called him by his name, kept walking, no acknowledgement whatsoever. Okay, no problem. So I put my stuff back like it was, continued doing my work. I think it was maybe 3 strongs later. No emotional maturity whatsoever, but matching energy. I said, okay. He walked over, and the environment that I worked in was really cool. So I had like a hood on. So like it was kind of like this. So the way I'm sitting, like I can see you because I can see you, but you don't know if I can really see you or not. And I had headphones in because I've had in headphones all the time, listening to music and podcasts while I work. So he tried to get my attention and he called my name over and over and over and over again. I never moved. Straight face, doing my job. Straight face, doing my job. I never moved, never broke, never did anything. And he finally walked away. And one of the my coworkers sent me a text and was like, he's gone. I knew he was gone, but I still wasn't going to move just in case you were standing close by waiting for me to respond to someone else. So when he completely left the room, I turned around to acknowledge my coworker that had texted me and said yes. She was like, your silence was so freaking loud. Oh my gosh. Like he was standing there screaming your name. I said, I heard him. But you completely ignored me when I spoke to you in a kind tone. Like I wasn't even there. Like I'm not talking to you like I'm invisible. Let me still be invisible while you're trying to get my attention. So that was my experience. Match your energy to protect. So that's all I wanted to share. But I mean, I remember too, there was a non-melanated person that had a meeting with our supervisor. You could hear him upstairs yelling, and clearly that was acceptable. But then another woman that was melanated had a meeting with him, and she came out upset, like visibly broken, ready, almost ready to cry. Like he was saying I was intimidating him and this, that, and the other. And I'm sitting here trying to keep my composure and not react. Oh, wow. So that's how I was saying, like, it just depends on who's reacting to it and how you're trying to react. Depending on that would like determine the response you get back.
Mm-hmm.
That leads me to, it makes me think of, um, you know, you always, we talk about professionalism, walking into the workplace professional, but maintaining dignity and respect for one another, you know, and dignity is a sense of self-worth for yourself, for yourself, and then respect is that individual honoring and recognizing the self-worth that you hold, and if we maintain that, and use, and walk in that and practice things like patience and being considerate, and maybe even seeking understanding, and even smile sometimes, those things can be very helpful to diffuse those types of situations. And a lot of times we can be prideful because or hold an offense because of because how someone mistreated us, which is understandable. But to maintain a sense of morale in the workplace, we may have to be that better person and say, hey,
Go high.
yeah, don't go nasty.
Don't go nasty.
But go high. And those are things that I had to learn over the years. I'm not speaking on these things, just because I had to learn I had to learn those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to, I think that's very important, to understand that we don't have to always engage one another, the same, or someone mistreats me, I'll mistreat them, or I'll do the same. But, seek some clarity, maybe give them some time, and, or even when that individual, spoke to you the next day, was the opportunity, to say, hey, I was trying to get your attention yesterday. What happened? Or whatever it may be. But I would just say that's a perfect learning opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say, like, because sometimes people make you want to match that energy.
Mm-hmm.
And at the times we have to realize, like, when the opportunity comes, like when he came, it was like, hey, you did this to me yesterday, and I didn't appreciate it. And just what you said, I felt like I was being ignored. I wasn't being seen, and that's not how I want to be here. Because sometimes when you make it, when you present someone with the truth in such a way, it makes them uncomfortable to the point where either they will deny and go into a hole, or be forced to acknowledge what you're saying. But no matter what, it's been said, and you state your position. Because what can happen, and the other way is like, I'm going to leave because now you didn't answer me. And maybe I'm not even thinking about what happened yesterday, or the 3 strongs, or 3 weeks ago. I'm just focused on what you did now. So this is going to be the genesis that I'm going to choose to acknowledge of whatever our issue is, like, and not recognizing that it actually stems from something before that, because we stay silent. So those are some of the things, like, when it comes to the toxicity, like, all right, what can we do to shift how something plays out based on how we acknowledge the spirit in someone else, and also ourselves.
May I just add one more thing? Because I know you're shifting into self-care, but being, that we are all in healthcare or moving towards that, we also need to look and maintain, pay attention to the fact that we are there for giving a service. and for patients. And if you maintain that, those, hostile or toxic environments, it's the patient that suffers, you know and that is what we want to be mindful of. So, and it makes it harder for a fellow co-worker to ask someone when in need. You can have a patient circling the drain, and you may want to overlook someone who you have a problem with, and because some issues that you have, and the patient, is missing out on the care that they need because you want to run to the other side or maybe wait for someone else to come. So we do have to maintain proper and professional relationships.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I'm gonna try to give the highlights.
okay.
Right. So this was shared with us from Anonymous in New Jersey, and she says, well, he or she. I know what the person is, but like it's gonna be anonymous to y'all. But Anonymous from New Jersey. My story of workplace toxicity involves a coworker being promoted and simply switching up. Within a few months, and with a few months, she fired um, people who were actually longstanding team members. They used to be friendly beforehand. The firings were due to personal reasons that were misrepresented, and it made them seem like they were bad employees. Then two others left the job for other ventures, and three more, including me, are currently looking. So it seems like so, and I'm gonna stop there because this kind of goes into and it's very long. So and we're like already 9:09. So well 9:11. Oh, interesting. So the point is it goes into the idea of like, when you're in a situation where everybody's friendly with one another, and then someone is promoted and then things change. And sometimes that's because of a lack of training, right? So there needs to be, and this comes from HR, there needs to be training to when someone is created, when someone comes in a managerial position, regardless of what level of manager. If you are in charge of managing staff and people other than yourself, there needs to be management set in place. So if you're coming in with experience of managing other people, then that can be like, this is the organizational culture that we have, and most jobs do have that. But if it's something that's specific for managers, then they can kind of get a sense of how the employees or lay staff, if you say, kind of like operate and move. If it is a person that is like coming in as a manager that's promoted right from within, then there needs to be like some managerial training, especially if you've never held a management position before. And if not, because we understand like some of these things cost money, and if you're a small organization, then maybe one thing that you can have is like some level of mentorship, right? So where a person is moving through the process, learning how to manage themselves and their own emotions and feelings and thoughts while they're managing their team, because it can be overwhelming to manage your own fears and anxieties about like, am I going to do a good job? With all the things that are coming at you, and your response may not match, or it may not match by being too extreme or not enough to whatever's coming your way. And then again, like as we were speaking before, we have to acknowledge how other people are going to actually receive whatever it is that we're saying. And then sometimes what happens is there's that back and forth where a situation becomes one thing where it didn't need to be, because nobody's kind of monitoring their own emotions and like what's happening. They're not being cognizant or being present about what's happening, or putting themselves in another's shoes. The other part is really having that candid conversation. It kind of goes to what you were saying, Emma Precious, about the look, this is what's coming down the pipeline. I want us to be able to work together. How many people actually have that discussion? And when you don't, and something happens, maybe it's untoward, are you able to kind of pull that former, friend who is now a subordinate aside and be able to say, listen, this, I really didn't like that. I really would want you to support me and this, that, or the other. And if you're not able to do that and nobody communicates, then it just becomes something hostile and snowballs into something that it didn't need to be. So that's what it sounds like, with this story here. So yeah, like the not necessarily being able to respond appropriately to a situation.
Yeah, I love the angles that you covered. It was really comprehensive. I think that as I was listening, I'm like, okay, I'm thinking about, I panned out, right? So it's like from the organizational perspective, there is value add, right? Always. We're always looking at the way that we can add value. There's always pardon me. There's always value add when you can do succession planning, right? That's number one. So by creating a system, not necessarily just when someone is being promoted or has been promoted, to kind of say, hey, I'll link you with this mentor, but actually putting that in place in advance to employees and available, right? Putting that in place in advance and making it available to employees who want to climb whatever the ladder is that your organization offers for them, right? Whatever their path is. Creating opportunities for that. One, it shows that you're invested. Two, it helps with succession planning, because as other people leave or are promoted internally, you have this funnel of well-equipped staff, right? Because it always feels great when you can see your colleague or see a peer promoted. I think I think it's often encouraging because it says
Yeah, it should.
right. That's why I said I think, like, if you're really supportive of seeing your peers and others grow. But I even thought from a patient care perspective, it helps to maintain that continuity of care. If we are cultivating an environment where everyone understands the mission and the vision, like in the story that was shared, the I'll say not so anonymous story, because you gave like breakdown. It was 7 employees, 3 gone, 1, 2 minus, 6 minus. So I'm like, if you could figure out the math and the locate. But that said, look at how many productive, long-standing employees may have lost their job or lost interest in staying in positions within an organization that I'm sure needs those people, right? Because now, like, I mean, I think we discussed this maybe offline a while back, but onboarding cost, yes, we did. Because when you shared this with me, the first thing I thought about was from the executive level. I'm like, onboarding is so expensive.
It is.
You're getting rid of people. We can't afford to fire all these folks and rehire and retrain and get them benefits. That is costly. So even
I would imagine so, being on the other end of being the one being onboarded, getting paid to orientate, which is not like laborious at all.
It's background checks. None of those things.
Even marketing to promote the position, though, like it is very costly, because the time that number one, once a person resigns, no matter how much notice they give, come on, it is what it is as far as the productivity, right? Because you're leaving. So everything begins to plummet as far as the bottom line from that moment. So as I listened, I kind of just thought of it from those other perspectives. This was so good. I always feel like we could do a part 2, but I know we have a lot more coming up in for the rest of this month with mental health awareness.
Yeah, we do. But like, we can always, I'm always open for a part 2, especially if people like are sending in like, oh, I heard you say this. Like, we will definitely pull up a part 2 if we get, a lot of requests to like talk about it. And even still, and maybe I can share more of the story, because there was a lot here. There's a lot of examples, but I wanted to give the broad strokes. I was like, and that was the first couple.
Yeah. Because I wanted to get more into the self-care that you were talking about, and, and making decisions to even stay in the work environment, but also discussing different types of, self-care that you can do. But I'll hold off
No,
So-
go ahead. You
Oh no,
can.
I'm just, one of one of them was actually getting medical care if you need it. There are a lot of healthcare workers, to include nurses, that do not pay attention to what their body is telling them. And I've seen several nurses, women nurses, end up, having hard days and going home and having strokes. And they're not listening to the signs, little really faint signs that they may be having, and they won't get medical attention for themselves. So
Mhm.
that was just one thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah, and we know that that's pervasive in the medical, like the health community. You have,
Mhm.
I have been guilty of that. Like, there's the talk about health, and it's like, well, when was the last time that you saw?
Yeah, me too. I'm guilty,
Right?
guilty. I'm
Um,
guilty. So
so focused on everybody else and everything else,
yes,
you don't take the time to focus on your own body. And then it comes back to that age old, like, how are you gonna love anybody else if you can't even love yourself? Or how are you gonna take care of anybody else if you don't even take care of yourself? So
Can't
like,
pour from an empty cup.
care of self means like removing myself from this environment if necessary. Sometimes it's like that, and it may be difficult because we even know now people are having a hard time finding positions. We fighting against robots now, right?
hmm
Like then we have to think about, okay, how can I shift myself to become useful someplace if I'm going to work for somebody else? Or what does that entrepreneur look like in me? Whatever it is that you need to do to again eliminate the toxicity or remove yourself, that's first.
yeah,
Even listening to y'all sharing that part, it makes me think about the people I've heard that are afraid to take days off because they're scared they're going to lose their job. So they have the anxiety even around caring for themselves because of the toxic environment.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I
Yeah,
have no
they said,
problem doing that.
yeah.
I think that also, well, I won't go there. I think sometimes also, because I was gonna say, maybe it's with newer employees, but no, it's with people, who've been in the in whatever industry they're working in, for years. But I just know that a lot of new nurses feel that way. But as you know, you become that veteran nurse, and like, you choose your battle. I'm taking the day off. Like, this was, this shift was hard. You will not be seeing me tomorrow. you know.
I have done that. I have done that. I'm like, listen, don't. I'm not coming. I'm not. I'm not gonna make it. I'm not gonna
Right.
make it. I need tomorrow. Like, I'll do the if I need to, but
Mhm.
it's not, I'm not coming. I can't do it.
Mhm.
but I was fortunate enough to be able to have and be working in an environment where I could do that.
Right.
Not everybody is.
Exactly.
I want to acknowledge. Not everybody can do that.
Right.
No.
And Ima Kuya, as you talk from the perspective of healthcare and particularly hospital setting, I just think about the shifts, right? And I kind of combined it with the idea of AI, or competing against robots. But it, there are many positive attributes to having that 12-hour shift. But I will also say that there are lots of drawbacks,
Mhm.
because number one, you're taxing your body in a very different way than you do when you work an 8-hour shift, or even if you do a double, right? And you're doing 2 8 hours, which is 16 hours. um there's a different sort of stressor on your body, as opposed to doing particularly consecutive 12 hours. And I don't mean 24 hours. I mean 12 on, 12 off, and then you come back the next day and then you do another 12, and you do that for 3 days, right? Um,
I've done 10 straight.
and that's illegal. That should never have happened, right? No, no, I'm very serious. And I don't mean that you committed a crime. I mean that the organization didn't support you, number one, being mentally clear. Like, and I'm sure you covered this, but I would say that what is it? A lack of sleep. Like, if a healthcare provider doesn't get a proper 8 hours of sleep, it's tantamount to having like 3 shots or something. So like,
Mhm.
even from that perspective, how clear is any, not you, because I know you're on it, but how clear is any, overworked healthcare provider when they
Right.
are forced? And I do say
Right.
forced because while we're talking about nurses and doctors and the like, I tend to like to acknowledge, in the behavioral health side of things, there are also the direct care staff, right? And those staff, at least I know in some states in the Northeast, those staff are mandated. They can be mandated, which means they have to work. They cannot go home. They are held, at work no matter what their home life obligations are. And in those instances, how productive can you be if you're truly tired or if you're truly stressed about childcare needs or
Right.
unmet childcare needs because
That's
you're now mandated at work?
yeah.
So I mean, clearly I'm passionate about this. I wanna also honor the time and like all of that. But there's so much to be said about just advocacy, being
Yes.
informed, like reading policies. You didn't got to read the whole manual.
Yeah.
Go in and read those workplace violence and
Yes.
read those employee health policies and use
Yes.
those services. Go to EAP if you need to. Come up with a self-care plan. Make sure you do have colleagues that you can just go and say, girl, or whomever, friend, whoever, I need to just go take a break. Like I need
Yeah.
a moment. And to those healthcare leaders, I'll say, create a loving and supportive and compassionate environment. If you, I know in one of my hospitals during COVID, we created a wellness center and a Zen room where there was a massage chair and where there was a pool table, and just giving the staff the opportunity to just say, it doesn't have to be a break. Just go take a minute. Go take a minute
Yes.
because we get to go home and maybe you cannot. So there's so much that we can do
Yeah.
collectively, and some of the things are really, sometimes it's just a smile and greeting someone,
Yes.
right? So let's
Yes.
remember to do those things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And most organizations, most workplaces, they do have, but like you said, like if your employees don't know about it or they're not aware of how it works, then it's not really useful. It's just kind of useless information sitting there. So like, yeah, while many may provide the resources for mental health support, you have to couple it with encouraging work life,
Mhm. Mhm.
supportive and
Mhm. Mhm.
environment, because it really negatively, if you have a toxic environment, it can really negatively affect employees and seep into organizational culture. So addressing and preventing toxic behavior is essential for creating that positive and healthy workspace so that you can have that productivity instead of having people work illegally,
Mhm.
mandated to
Mhm.
work. So you can have that, productivity, engagement, and overall job satisfaction. Because I a lot of times question those annual surveys.
Mhm.
Such and such is the best place to work, and you get to a place and you find out like what in
Mhm.
the heck is
Mhm.
going on over here? Everybody's
Mhm.
mad. Like
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah. I tell the truth. Here in California, it's mandated to take the course, and what I would like to even say for those who are mandated to take certain courses, as it relates to workplace hostility, um, to take the course seriously and apply it. Don't look at it as, oh, I'm just meeting a requirement, but there are a lot of useful tools in the booklets that are given to you, or whatever pamphlets you have, and apply them, utilize them, because that is changing the culture if the culture is toxic.
Mhm. Yeah. So that's what needs to happen. The culture needs to be changed. And if the culture can't change, then you have to change. And
Mhm.
or you have to leave. Like that's the reality of what you have to do to maintain your own mental well-being and insanity, quite frankly.
Yes,
You
this was
know?
good.
Oh, give thanks, give thanks. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Naya. I know she had to head out. Thank you, Imanaya, for joining us. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for sending in the stories. You know, I wanted to get to more of it, but like we were having such a good conversation over here. So I was like, I'm just going to share the first part of this story, and like we'll address some of those things. But, you know, we can definitely have a part 2. I feel like most of the topics we had so far this season probably need a part 2, especially the ones because like True House Live is supposed to be an hour, you know. So like the ones that go over, I'm like, all right, I'm making marks and notes on our, you know, schedule. Like, okay, what needs a part 2? So we'll definitely be back with some part 2 for things that kind of got a lot of buzz and things like that. So we will definitely, as always, put all of the hot mentions and the resources that were mentioned during the podcast into the description box. Make sure you visit deidresully.com, and you can also download and subscribe. Download the podcast or subscribe to any of your favorite podcast channels, and you'll find us there. So whether it's Pandora, Spotify, give me some more, Apple, iTunes, podcasts, Amazon, we everywhere. We're everywhere. So make sure you just subscribe. You can go to the website and subscribe through there, and find whichever channel that you want to, whichever channel you prefer. With that being said, again, make sure you visit Amazon.com and pick up the scriptural guide to overcoming the 7 ailments, as well as visit deidresully.com and download your free ebook, The 10 Points in Public.
You guys are inspiring. Oh my goodness. Writing books. Oh, wow.
Thank you. Why, thank you. Listen, we're trying to be entrepreneurs over here, so we don't deal with workplace toxicity.
Yes.
Workplace toxicity. That's the oxymoron for me. It's like, we do that. We take a hard moonwalk back from toxicity.
Absolutely.
So, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you in 2 weeks. I think that's going to be June 6th. We will see you on June 6th for our 41st show. Oh, today was our 40th show.
Yes, it was.
So we'll see you for 41 or 5. Our Truth and Power show.
All right.
Truth and Power. So let's see what that one's going to be about. So we'll see you then. Thank you for joining us. Peace, everyone.
Peace, everyone.
Peace.